We're on the Tohono O'odham Tribal Reservation in Arizona. It's rainy and cold today, but most of the time it's baking hot and bone dry. The plants here have evolved to thrive in such extremes, and the Tohono O'odham people in turn base their way of life on the plants. It was a rich bounty, and I do mean was, because by the 1940s, widespread use of traditional foods was dying out. Today, only a few of the elders, like Francis Manuel, are familiar with the old foods. This is Francis's daughter, Dolores.
This is wild spinach. We've been eating since we were little.
Tortillas were once made with desert ingredients. Now the elders are saying it's time to revive the old ways. Is this an attempt to go back totally to the food that used to be eaten, or to just introduce some of it into the diet?
It is an attempt in trying to create an awareness to people that they have to change. Something has to be done.
This is what something has to be done about. Caroline Jackson, who lives on the nearby Pima Reservation, has diabetes. So do half of all adult Pima and Tohono O'odham, 15 times the national average. The two tribes also have exceptionally high rates of obesity, even though their diets are average. Extensive study has suggested that in one special way, these people are not average. They have what's called the thrifty gene, which allowed them to put on weight very efficiently during the desert's times of plenty, so they could get through the bad times. The problem is it's good times all the time now. Nowadays, like all Americans, they get their food from a supermarket shelf. They spend a lot of time in front of the TV.
But some of these rides are pretty darn exciting.
And they drive practically everywhere. Only 50 years ago, the two tribes were tough and active farmers, hunters, and gatherers with no obesity and no diabetes. Things began to break down when the region's water was pumped away to growing cities. And even though they still had the skills to gather wild food or divert flash floods to their fields, it became impossible to resist adopting a typical American lifestyle. So you make a brush out of this and you rub the fruit with it, and that gets the needles off?
You see the fruits will be sitting up here, like that, and you'll brush them off. Brush them off pretty good.
A brush made from the creosote bush gets off the almost invisible coating of tiny, sharp spines. Prickly pear fruit and pads were important foods, although you had to avoid the poisonous seeds, Danny said.
There's a mesquite tree right here.
Mm-hmm.
See, here's some of the dried bean, and they'll be hanging on the trees, and the kids will walk by and pull them off and eat them.
Mesquite pods could be ground up to make a sweet and nutritious flour. They were good to just chew on as well. Taste it?
Oh,
Can I just take off a little bit? I don't want to spoil it for somebody.
Don't swallow the seeds, too.
Don't swallow the seeds. What'll happen to me if I swallow it?
Same thing happens when you eat the prickly pear with the seeds.
Which I have to go to the hospital.
Yeah, give me an enema.
Boy, I tell you, this program is really dangerous. But it's all seeds. What do you mean don't swallow the seeds? There's nothing but seeds here.
Chew it and suck it.
I'm going to get rid of the seed, wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Throw it out.
Throw that away. It's sweet, sweet, and chewy. And it tastes like something that I know. It tastes like, you know what it tastes like? Like a box of Cracker Jacks. It's sweet and crunchy. It's a snack bush.
Yep.
Nice. Francis, how did you learn about all this?
My grandmother taught me.
Your grandmother?
When we were kids, Yeah.
On this plant, the cholla buds grow.
In spring, when the rains came, everyone had to gather cholla cactus buds. Okay, so that's where they grow. And then if you don't pick it, it grows into this. Huh?
Yes,
Like mesquite pods, cholla buds were gathered, dried, and stored in large quantities. What is it that you eat off of this?
The saguaro fruit. It grows on the end of of the arms of the cactus.
Yeah.
Usually it'll grow in bunches, you know, on each arm, all the way up into the top.
Saguaro fruit was gathered in late June. Every family had its own long poles for reaching the fruit. Poles made with the skeleton of the saguaro cactus itself. The desert for most of us looks to be a barren and inhospitable place, but for the Pima and Tohono O'odham, it was the source of life.
Our food came from the desert. We had to work for it. You know, it was a lot of work to go out and gather. When we planted, there was a lot of time in the field. Back then, we were people who were in good shape. Prior to 1960, there was no diabetes. And then, but after that, it just kind of came upon us.
The blessing speaks of the pleasure given by plants growing and covering the earth. It's appropriate because we're going to have a meal made entirely of crops which grow in the desert around us.
That's good.
We're joined by Gary Nabhan, a botanist who specializes in the desert plants of the Southwest. These are beans?
Red peppery.
Tepary beans were grown in the floodplains. They resist desert heat and they're digested slowly, good for diabetics who need to avoid spikes in blood sugar. It turns out all the foods have some special quality.
Like a spinach.
It's a wild spinach.
Wild
Yeah.
spinach.
And it comes up in the summer, and it's really the best tasting spinach in the world.
These are sliced prickly pear pads. We'll talk more about them in a minute. And here's the wild spinach. Amaranth greens with high protein seeds and high calcium leaves. What is this?
Mesquite beans.
Oh, mesquite. Okay, so just like 1 teaspoonful?
Two.
Two. Okay. 1, 2. And then
That's enough.
The mesquite drink is full of sugar, but it's a kind of sugar that you don't need insulin to digest.
So, you know, if you don't like it.
That's good. What do you mean if I don't like it? That's good.
Okay, that's enough.
That's enough. Next, cholla cactus buds. Frances gathered and dried these herself last spring, 6 months ago. And finally, my personal favorite, really powerful little wild chilies gathered up in the mountains on the reservation.